Mr. Rivkin, you raise a sort of gallery of horribles of the things that might go wrong with such a commission. Let me ask you, just to sort of narrow the point, if you assume that the purpose of this commission is advisory and policy only, if you assume that criminal law enforcement is properly cabined within the executive branch, as it should be, if you assume that we set it up so that its coordination with law enforcement on issues like immunity is properly coordinated so that it does not intrude into that function, and if it is set up not, as you suggest, as a private entity, but rather in the proper exercise of delegated congressional oversight authority, do you still oppose the commission, even in the absence of the parade of horribles that you suggest?
Thank you for your question, Senator Whitehouse. With respect, this assumes too much, and let me unpack it. To me, law enforcement function has a variety of aspects, as you all know. Having a situation where the ultimate decision to proceed with an indictment, bringing the case before a grand jury and proceeding with the prosecution, is reserved to the Department of Justice, and I'm sure that would be the case, does not cure, because nobody's suggesting.
Obviously, nobody's suggesting otherwise.
Right, but to me, that's not enough. I can give you at least several examples where other aspects of law enforcement function, namely deciding as a threshold determination, which is why I mentioned the controversy about the alleged loosening of the threshold determinations, the decision whom to investigate, particularly if you're talking with about a small group of easily.
We do that in Congress every moment.
But you have the right, with all due respect, Senator, to do that in the exercise of your legislative and oversight function.
And we equally have a right to delegate it.
No, I do not believe, and I don't want to get.
You don't believe that the congressional oversight function is delegable?
I do not believe that the congressional oversight function is readily delegable.
Readily is a big hedge. Well, you believe it is delegable or not?
To a private commission?
Question.
I do not. You certainly can organize yourself.
Well, now you've used another hedge word. You've said a private commission.
Well,
that's not a word that I use. Okay. Assume that it is delegated to a public, properly appointed commission that is exercising delegated congressional authority.
If appointed in accordance with Appointments Clause, that would make a huge difference. Appointed in a sense that you and members of a minority choose people and the president appoints some people, no. If you could configure a commission in a way that makes it an extension of an Article I branch, I would not have fundamental problems with it. I don't see how that's practicable or possible. And you can call it public, but I don't see how you can delegate your oversight responsibilities. But consider another question. If the real intent, and again, if it, I hate to sound trite, but if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, whether it's called a policy exercise or not, even today we've heard several times from my colleagues in this panel about the need to come up with criminal prosecutions. What this commission does basically comes up with a bunch of files, the kind of things that a public integrity section, national security section, U.S. Attorney's Office does, on 12 or 14 people, and then passes the buck to the Department of Justice in the public spotlight. I would submit to you that that fundamentally subverts the most basic constitutional protections. And with respect, if this was contemplated in a different political context, every law professor I know would be screaming about it in terms of what a horrible violation of civil liberties it is. Okay? Moreover, this commission—
Every law professor you know would be screaming about this?
Yes, if it was done in a context of—
Oh, if. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, if it was done in the context of a conservative administration—
I'm trying to get an unhedged phrase out of you in the course of this.
I'll give you an example. My colleague in his prepared testimony, Professor Rivkin, mentions a hypothetical of a Bush administration in the aftermath of 9/11 disaster, suggesting a private commission to investigate organizations in this country, charitable and otherwise, to look at the nefarious influence and the extent to which they made this attack possible, with a view towards possible prosecutions for appropriate channels. Do you not think that most of the law faculties in this country would be up in arms about this? The fact that we're Bush administration officials here doesn't make any difference. They're Americans. They're entitled to a full panoply of constitutional rights. You don't get, and the fundamental point that I make about—
So organized criticism of past administration officials is an offense against their civil liberties?
Organized criticism in the policy
I thought that was one of the things we signed up for when we took these jobs.
Organized criticism in the context of looking at individual criminal culpability.
No. There you go again. We just discussed that this would not be looking at individual criminal culpability. My assumption at the very beginning of our discussion was that we had properly cabined the criminal law enforcement role.
I said with respect that assumes too much. There's no way to cabin that.
Of course there is.
Pray tell how you're going to come up, if you are a member of this commission, with an analysis of, and I don't want to use names, but 2 or 3 members of a Bush administration violated, for example, a statute against torture, which is a criminal statute, as you very well know. How would you exactly write this up in a way that does not come to conclusions about individual? Because if you say Mr. A committed torture, and by the way, if you say it properly, not only in terms of acts but adequate mens rea, that reads like a document that an assistant U.S. attorney prepares to send to his boss to get a decision on whether or not to prosecute. How else would you write it up?
Well, my time has expired, but I would suggest, Mr. Rivkin, that until you know, and we all know, what was actually done under the Bush administration, you not be so quick to throw other generations of Americans under the bus and assume that they did worse.
Mr. Rivkin,